Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening and welcome to webinar 3 in our September webinar series. Tonight's webinar, We Want You, Board Recruitment, is all about a topic that we often hear nonprofits struggle with, and that is finding people to fill your board seats. So pay attention tonight and consider registering for the nonprofit conference. If you've been on a few webinars in the series, you'll know that the nonprofit conference is coming up soon, and we'll be doing case studies, and one of them is going to be on boards. So you may be able to use some of this board recruitment information at the nonprofit conference. So a little bit about us. We are a capacity building center serving the Upper Peninsula. Makes sense why we have the UP Nonprofit Conference, right? So we also have a membership program where we have discounted member rates for workshops. We have trainings available. We have free webinars like tonight's. We have a special rate for the conference. So if you're considering coming and you're not a member, be sure to check out our member rates and consider joining. And then we have some follow-up services that come with membership. So especially after attending a training like tonight, you can get a hold of one of our staff members and we'll come out and do up to 4 hours of consulting with you or your board to figure out where our work can help you. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Chad, our presenter tonight. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you everyone who's on the webinar tonight. And for those who can't make it in person that are listening later, we're just glad that you're taking in the information. So board recruitment is one of my favorite topics. It's something that I've, in the last 5 years of working here at Grow and Lead, have been able to help several organizations on how to improve that process, how to not be afraid of the how to do it. So tonight I'm just going to give you some tips and tricks. Some are best practices, some are stuff that I've learned along the way. And let me just say this, if you take to heart and put into practice many of these ideas I share tonight, every group, every organization that I have worked with, that we've gone through developing a board recruitment process, all of them had great success, found new board members, and most importantly, as you'll hear me say several times this evening, the right board members. That's almost more important, if not equally important, than finding board members. This is a quick one. We're only scheduled to be for half an hour, so I'm going to move fast. If you want to dig in deeper, you can always contact us, like Victoria said, and we can give you some tools, some templates, some guides, some feedback, some help, some facilitation, encouragement, whatever it takes to help you grow your board or transition your board, etc. So first of all, we're going to start off as you're looking at healthy board recruitment. It needs to be 4 things, and we'll dig into these more deeper as we go along tonight, but 4 things. It needs to be intentional, it needs to be targeted, it needs to be thorough, and it needs to be continuous. If you're not doing these things, these 4 things with your board recruitment, I guarantee you you're struggling with finding the right people, finding anybody, finding people with the right kind of skill sets and backgrounds to help you, and you're probably always chasing people down to try to fill your board. That's not healthy, that's not helpful. So, and speaking of that, what an unhealthy board recruitment is, as I just mentioned, it's last minute. You know what I mean? It's the one where, oh my goodness, next month we're lose 4 people from term limits and they're terming off the board. Oh no, we need board members. And you have less than 4 weeks to figure that out. You're desperate. In other words, your board has been shrinking, people are resigning, stepping back, stepping off. You're like, we just need people. And that's the very last one. We'll accept any body. Literally a body to fill a seat rather than someone truly passionate to volunteer for your organization. Another unhealthy and very common issue with board recruitment is not doing your due diligence on getting to the background and understanding who the people are that you're about to invite into the most important leadership role of your organization, the decision maker, the ultimate authority of the board of directors. but there's a very big lack of vetting and researching and background into potential board members. And then there are very unhealthy ways that we just grab people, throw them on a board and say, here we go. We don't do enough to properly train them, inform them of multiple things, what their roles and responsibilities are, what the expectations are, what it means to serve on a board, and then how to do it in the right way and with the best information. So this is unhealthy. If any of those sound familiar to you, that you've done them, welcome to the club. But we can go back and we can become and we can develop a healthy board recruitment process. So my question is this: why do we let ourselves get to this unhealthy place when it comes to board recruitment? What really holds us back? And what holds us back is fear. Now, some of the macho people are going, what? I'm not afraid to recruit board members. I probably will call you out on that. There's a lot of reasons why we're afraid when it comes to recruiting board members. And I just listed off a handful of them, and here they are. We're afraid to go and ask people to serve on our board because they're just too busy. We're afraid to ask people to serve on our board because, well, they already serve on like 3 other boards. Or this organization just takes too much commitment. I know that you couldn't handle it or couldn't do it. Or, you know, our background and how much we pry into the background, if that's a well-developed piece of your plan, it's just too nosy. People aren't going to want to have to go through that scrutiny. Or I just don't want to beg people to be on our board. Or the classic one, well, they'll just say no anyway. All of these are excuses. They're poor excuses. And if you've heard any of your board chair, even staff say these kind of things, it doesn't have to be this way. This is a sign of unhealthy. It's a sign of a board that doesn't understand what their role is in recruiting and repopulating their board. It's also someone who probably doesn't have a really good understanding of their organization and is not confident in sharing that with outsiders or someone who's a potential board member, or it's someone who simply is burnt out and they're not really willing to put in the work it takes to find quality people to join them on the board because maybe they've just been at too long or whatever the reason might be. But these are bad excuses. They're excuses we hear often, but they're bad ones. Here's why. Too busy. How do you know someone's too busy? You only know if they're too busy if you ask them and they tell you they're too busy. They'll just say no anyway. How about this? How about give them a chance to say no before you already determined for them that they're not going to want to do it? They serve on several boards. That's possible. Maybe they do. Maybe it's you're targeting somebody who has a specific talent or niche and you're going, that's exactly who we want, but oh, they serve on so many boards. Don't make up their mind for them. Maybe they're leaving some of those boards. Maybe they want a different change. Maybe your organization is more centered with their passion and what they really want to be involved in. So again, before dismissing them because they're active in their volunteerism on boards, let them tell you it takes too much commitment, that they're serving already. You should never apologize. Never, ever, ever apologize that if your vetting process or your background checks or your interviews or reference checking comes across as too nosy. If you understand the importance of a board member to your organizations, the legal responsibilities, the moral and ethical responsibilities it means to serve as a board member for a nonprofit organization, you should never apologize for making sure you're getting trustworthy, good people to serve alongside you. Never. It doesn't mean you can't forewarn someone and say, hey, we do have this process, we need to dig in and whatever. If someone's well-intentioned, if they have nothing to hide, they won't be afraid of your process. So don't be scared of that, because if you're also looking at people who would be scared of that, you're probably not looking at the right people to serve on your board. And it's never begging. If you've gotten to the point where you feel like you're begging to get someone on your board, you're doing it wrong. And you're doing it wrong. And I'll show you why. Because if you go back to the healthy of being intentional, of targeting, thorough, and continuous, you will never get to the place where you have to beg anybody. And the moment you get to begging somebody, you're already asking for the wrong reasons. and probably don't have, again, the right person, or you're not approaching it from the right angle. So that's all my introduction. Now let's get into the heart of it. What does it mean to have a healthy board recruitment process? I said first, you have to be intentional. In other words, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. So if your organization doesn't have a plan of how it goes about recruiting board members, this is hopefully what you'll get from tonight's little quick talk. First of all, you have to know your needs. To be able to fill something, you need to know how many seats or how many positions you need to fill. In other words, have an understanding of, are people terming off? How many people resigned this year? How many spaces or seats are we supposed to fill according to our bylaws? So know what your needs are as far as how many people you would like to have on your board. A lot of that should come out of too is what work needs to be done, what kind of areas need to be covered. We can talk about committees. I've actually talked about them quite a bit in other webinars, but if you need certain committees to be filled, what kind of person, but how many do you need on your board to really do the work of the organization and lead them well? The second part of knowing your needs is what kind of skills, expertise, or experience is needed. So if you have a bunch of passionate people for the programming of your organization, but you have no one on your board that understands anything of the finances, you're probably in a dangerous place. And also that's a certain skill and experience and even education that you really might want to find to be on your board. Is your board diverse? The more diverse your board is, the more well-rounded the opinions, ideas, perspectives will be to help you do your job to the most complete to all different stakeholders and clients that you might be serving. Diversity is a big word. It means diverse, so it means everything. It's not just everyone jumps to cultural or ethnic or race. No, it could be education level, socioeconomic backgrounds. It could be age, gender, all sorts of things can create a diverse board. So even if in an area where there tends to be a very similar when it comes to the race, and there's not a lot of diversity that way, there's other ways to diversify your board. One tool that we have, and I did not include it in the slides because there are literally dozens of different examples, is a board matrix. Let me explain it really quickly. You have a list of important skill sets, important experience, important knowledge areas listed usually on your on a sheet, and then you have your board members, and each board member takes that and checks off which of the areas they feel like they have knowledge of, experience in. And so then what happens is once you get all your board to partake in this and take this little checklist, you see the gaps in what's not represented or not being taken care of or not covered on your board. So you'll find out that, like, wow, we have a dozen board members and only one of them is comfortable with financial things. Okay, well, I just used that example before, but that's, what if you're in the business of education, is general education, or working with young people, and you have no one on your board that has any background or knowledge or experience in those areas? That's a concern. You want to have people who can intelligently inform some of that work. Maybe someone who has an experience serving on boards might be another part of your thing. But then also this matrix will also have all your typical diversity, including age ranges and backgrounds and stuff like that. So I give you an example. I've just been working with a group this past week who's going through this process right now. And one thing they realized is that every single one of their board members is over the age of 50. So they're going, wow, we need to diversify the age of some of our board members. So as they begin their plan, one of the things they're going to do is, wow, can we find someone with some skill sets, but also maybe a little bit younger, to kind of diversify the perspectives and input from a different generational type of perspectives. So if you want that tool, you can Google board matrix, and I guarantee you, or board recruitment matrix, whatever those terms are, you'll find a bunch of examples. The biggest thing is to customize it to what your needs for your organizations, which is going to be unique. There are going to be a lot of similarities, but you want to make sure you're touching on the things that are important for you to see if they're represented on your board currently. So have a plan, come up with a plan, know what it is you need before you start going out and doing anything when it comes to recruiting. Have a plan, be intentional. So next, it's targeted. And this kind of flows right out of what I said. In other words, you want to target your potential new board members, your recruits, so to speak, with a bullseye, not dropping a bomb, or like the shotgun approach. You want to really narrow focus in on finding those individuals that would best fit you. So ways you can do this, you can brainstorm. Once you have in your hands your knowledge, you've done the board matrix, you have your needs of how many people you need to find, what kind of skills, experience, diversity, whatever needs to be represented, or you'd like to have represented on your board, you can brainstorm names. This is a great opportunity for everyone to share, like, I know this person, that person, this person. Sometimes there's crossover, like, oh yes, I know that person. That person would really be passionate. I've heard them talk about this. So you can discuss people in general during this brainstorming session and come up with a list. I have yet to have a single group sit there and look at me in crickets. No one has a suggestion. Everyone has ideas. If you think there's no one to ask, you have not taken the step to even brainstorm. But if you get a group of your board members in a room and start brainstorming potential people, especially in light of those two needs areas we just talked about, how many people you need? Do we need 2? Do we need 6? And then also those skill sets. Do we need someone with a public service or a governmental background? Do we need someone with education? Do we need somebody with psychology? Whatever it might be for your organization. If you start looking through those lenses, all of a sudden names start surfacing and everyone knows different people. So there's your brainstorming session. Then once you've got your brainstorming session done, you have a list of names, all right? Then you go through and say, okay, who knows these people? All right, let's figure out if there's even a remote interest from this person. Just the soft, it's not even a sell, but that's that conversation, that first connect to say, hey, we're just talking about board work, whatever, at my organization, and your name came up. Your thoughts? That simple first but it's going to come best from someone with a personal or professional connection. Again, not someone cold out of the blue coming up to them going, hey, you don't know me, but obviously it's going to work better if you know them. So however, who you pick to do those first contacts to your top 3 or 4 candidates, or however many you're trying to fill, make sure you pick the right people to make that connection. Not only do they need to have some buy-in, personal or professional, but that person needs to go out and do that conversation and be prepared. They need to be educated on what your organization is. They need to be educated on what it means to serve on your board. The worst thing that happened is say, well, I know that person, so I'll just talk to them. Go out there, ask the question, and have the person say, oh, I might be interested, and start asking a bunch of questions, and you look at them going, I don't know. I don't know. So before you look to really engage somebody about potential board service, make sure the board itself and the members are up to speed, up to date on what the organization is doing. They fully understand what it means to serve. So when someone asks the expectation levels, or they ask what's required of them, that they actually can answer them. All right. So that's very important. If you're not comfortable with that as a board member, before volunteering to connect or contact somebody, make sure you brush up with that. Find someone, whether that's the board chair or another exec committee person, to make sure you have the right tools so you can communicate effectively. And lastly, make assignments with deadlines. In other words, if John's saying he's contacting those top 2 people, say, great, that's your assignment for before next month, or in 3 weeks. Can you send out an email to everyone, let us know at least the preliminary if that person's interested or not, so we can decide to keep going down the list, or if we're good to keep moving forward with those 2 candidates. Moving along quickly here. Thorough, do your homework, please. I know so many boards that just say, hey, they have a good reputation, let's just take them. There is very much a lack of making people go through an application process, of doing your due diligence to check into that person, do a little bit of a vetting. I'm not talking about go hardcore and dig into everything, but you want to know who you're dealing with here. Even if it's someone you've known for a long time, there's been far too many situations that have popped up, and when there's things in people's past that come up and, well, whoa, we probably wouldn't have had them if we had known. So do your homework. Make sure there is someone that actually does an interview with them to see what kind of understanding they have of the organization. If they're really looking to serve and are interested, hopefully they know at least something about your organization. So do a little background, check some references, find out the character, find out something about the person before you just go, oh yeah, that's good, they meet a need. Let's all in favor say aye. So do a little work, make sure you plan, you have an application, you have a process in place to just do a little bit of digging to make sure you're getting quality people who will serve faithfully and honestly in your organization. And the last part is being thorough. Have an orientation process. This is probably one of the ones that people just don't have. They have the executive director or CEO of the organization sit down and explain a little bit to the person. First of all, that's inappropriate. It should be a board chair, vice chair, someone else on the board who goes through the orientation with a new board member, not staff. Just so in case you didn't know, I preached that one for quite a while. But besides that point, you need to have some sort of process. I remember going into boardrooms where they say, I've been serving on the board for 6 months and I still don't know what I'm doing here. The worst one was someone told me they've been serving on boards for 25 years of different organizations, and until the night where I told them basic board 101, didn't have a clue what they're supposed to be doing as a board member. That's tragic and sad. So what is an orientation process? It's really what it is bringing someone up to speed so they can actually function and serve as an actual board member and not just sitting back and waiting to figure things out over time. So some things you can have in an orientation, either an orientation session or an orientation manual, depending on what your organization wants. Here's a few things that I would suggest to include in an effective orientation. This is including but not limited to, so your organization may have more. Definitely have an office or facility tour, depending on what your organization has. Make sure they understand where the work is being done out of, where it is, all the different stuff. Have a presentation or a meeting with the executive director and key staff members, so this new board member can ask a few questions about what happens in the day-to-day work, so they have a better understanding of what's being done in the organization. Make sure you give them documents about the history of the organization, like where have we come from, how did we get here, any current newsletters or updates. Make sure they know the website and social media so they can get involved and check that stuff out. Obviously, a copy of either your articles of incorporation, but especially your bylaws. A new board member should have that in hand. If you have a strategic plan, that should be shared with them as well, so they know the direction and what decisions have been made and where they're going in the next few years. Copies of the most recent financials. How about this? How about setting up a presentation or an explanation with either the treasurer of the board, or maybe if there's a staff person who's the head of the financials or accounting in your organization. How about a meeting with that and the new board member or members so that they can understand what budgets are, how they work, what a board member's role is in setting budgets, how to read the different reports, what's the 990 and why is it important. There's so many board members serving on nonprofit boards who can't even read financial statements. Well, it's really hard for them to give oversight if they don't understand what they're looking at. So provide them an avenue and a way so they can learn what they need to learn and be prepared to serve. Other things, organizational chart, job descriptions, the list of all the different programming, especially if you have multiple locations that it's happening at. The committee roles and job descriptions within committees that the new board member might be able to serve on. Maybe something like a board 101. You could even steal one of our YouTube videos of many board 101 webinars I've done, which really helps someone understand the basic roles and responsibilities of board members, and then also including that specific expectations that might be unique for your board, whether it's attendance policies or giving policies or whatever it might be. Another thing to have in an effective orientation is meeting minutes. from at least the last few, if not in the last year. How about meeting schedules? When do the board meetings happen? When do different committees happen? So they can check their calendar and make sure it's going to work for them. Does the board have a board manual, their guiding principles or whatever? They should have that. And lastly, I really think for an effective orientation, I think it's important for the board chair to sit down one-on-one with a new board member, just so that they can establish that leadership role and letting them know that that board chair is going to be leading this process, helps lead the organization. And as a new board member, that's their go-to. That's the person they look to, is the board chair. I know that was really quick, but hopefully you can get some of that stuff. But I think those are important to be thorough when trying to recruit and get new board members and getting them on board. Lastly, continuous. In other words, board recruitment doesn't happen once a year, right when you're up against the wall and up against your deadlines to fill board positions for the next year. That is not how it's done. The best way to do it is always being prepared for the next time that someone all of a sudden has to resign, someone moves away, whatever the case might be. Always be prepared. So how do you do that? If you don't have this committee, I suggest you start one, or have some subgroup of the board who's responsible for bringing this up and making sure it's addressed. And that's the board development / board governance, however you want to say it. This group of people are the ones who will do this continuous process to look for board members. That whole steps I gave earlier, knowing your need, knowing what the board matrix is, updating the board matrix every year, because as you bring on new people, they'll change the needs of what's represented or on your board. So someone should be continuing to look at that. Committee involvement I put on there because great way to look at potential board members is getting them involved in committee work first. Remember, the committees of the board do not have to be made up of only board members. You can get other people from the community. So if you have someone who might be interested in potentially volunteering with your organization, but you're not sure if they're ready for board work, or they're not sure, get them involved in the committee. They can give their expertise, they can give their input, and then the more they're involved in the committee work, they're learning about your organization and hopefully building a passion and a heart for your organization. And it's a great place kind of to fish from for potential board members, because they're already involved, they're already invested. So never stop searching and brainstorming potential and possible candidates for your board. Have a list, keep a list of potential people, because if you only have 2 openings this year, you might have 2 or 3 the next year. And so if you have this list, you have these go-to people that you can go, okay, hey, we didn't get to them last year, they didn't work out, but let's recircle back, and maybe this person, we'll get down to this person, and they might be potential. Because remember, board members don't always leave at the end of their term. They don't always leave at the end of your fiscal year. Things happen, and sometimes vacancies pop up, or in the course of the work of the organization, a new area of expertise is needed, and all of a sudden, whoa, we don't have anyone that can do this. Yes, you could hire a consultant or whatever, but you could also look for that if it's an important direction your organization is going in. You can look for someone specific that has that skill set to help advise that on an ongoing basis. So if you're continually working at keeping your list of potentials up to date, if you're continuing to brainstorm as new people grow up and get careers, as new people come in town or leave town, keep your list going so you always have potential people to reach out to in case of a sudden resignation or someone had to leave the board for whatever reason. So if you're always ready, it's almost like that Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, always being prepared kind of idea. So that's what you want to be. You don't want this to be a last minute thing at the very end of your fiscal year or at the end of the terms where you're rushing just to find anybody. That does not help your organization. You want to meet the certain specific areas that you need. You want to make your board more diverse. So it needs to be planned. So be intentional. Be targeting people specifically. It works so much better when you go in saying, we're targeting you because you have this skill set that we want represented on our board. That message really resonates with people. Be thorough in your work. Make sure you're finding good quality, high character people to serve alongside you, because you're going to be relying on them when it comes to decision making. So you want to have them but the best people possible. And then again, continuous. Keep the process going. Never stop brainstorming potential ideas and who might be a good candidate or who might really be the next one to take you to the next level as far as board membership goes. I told you it'd be fast and crazy, and it was. It's already 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to hear more, reach out to me or anyone here at Grow and Lead. On Facebook, we have our web address, glcyd.org, or you can feel free to email me. Thank you so much for joining us for this quick one. Hopefully you learned some good tips, and we're here to help if you need more guidance in the future. Thank you and have a great evening.